Okay, so today we're going to take a look at the selection tools. And these tools are used to select out things in your photograph that you want to move or change, or just tell Photoshop this is where I want you to do anything that I'm telling you to do in that selected area. So we're following along in the book. I'm going to follow the Adobe Photoshop CC Classroom in a book, the 2018 release. And we're going to be dealing with these three tools right here at the top of our toolbar. The first is the marquee tools. We have a rectangular marquee and an elliptical marquee. And then we have the next one down is what's called freehand selections. These are lasso tool, the polygonal lasso tool, and the magnetic tool. And then finally we have the quick selection tool here, which is a edge-based selection. And then we have the magic wand tool, which is a color-based selection. So let's get going. So our first tool that we'll be using is going to be our quick selection tool, which is right here, third one down. And the quick selection tool is rather a quick way of selecting out something, especially when it has a very well-defined edge. And we're actually going to be selecting out this sand dollar here, and that has a very well-defined edge. Now we want to make sure that we have auto enhance selected up here, and want to make sure that that's on, because that's going to help us select the area quite well. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. Now there are a couple ways to zoom in Photoshop, a number of ways. You can come over here to the magnifying glass, but once you do that, then you have to work your way back to the selection tool. So we're just going to hold down the Z key, and that's going to give us a zoom, which allows us to zoom in. And then now we can see our selection here. So I'm just going to take my selection tool and click on the sand dollar, and you see that it made an excellent selection around the edge of this sand dollar, and we can just go right with that. So once we have our selection made, we're now going to move it, and the first thing we have to do is zoom out. So if we come over here and double click on the hand right here, that's going to zoom us back out to full screen for our entire picture, and we see that our tool is selected here. Now we can go up here and click on our move tool here, and this is going to allow us to grab this sand dollar, select the sand dollar, and move on up to right about in this square. We're going to place it, and you can see that there's a shadow outline there to give you an idea as to where it needs to go. And we're going to place it right in there and let go. And all I did was left click on my mouse button and drag it on up here. And once I let go, it's set in its spot. Now it still can move if I grab it or click on my mouse. So what I want to do is go up to selection and go down to deselect, and that's going to deselect that and leave that there. So we already have our first one in place, and again that's using the quick selection tool. The next thing we're going to want to select is this plate right here, and you can see that's an oval. So we're going to go up to our marquee tool selections here, and we're going to pick the elliptical marquee tool, and this is going to allow us to draw a circle or ellipse around this plate. Now, if I click and I drag, which is what I'm doing right now with my mouse, you can see that I'm drawing a marquee, but it's not quite a selection, I should say an elliptical selection around this plate, but it's not quite lining up. So there are a couple ways I can move this. Now, I've clicked and dragged, and I still have my mouse clicked. I'm going to hold down my space bar, and now when I move my mouse, I can move this selection tool around. So I'm lining it up with the upper left of that plate, and now I let go of my space bar, and I drag it on down and move it out a little bit wider. I'm selecting the space bar again. You can see that the width comes up, a number, or Y I should say, maybe that's what changed. And I'm dragging it to that upper left edge again. And now I'm moving my marquee tool around until it fits this entire oval. Now I'm going to zoom in here just to show you. And I probably should have moved in at the first place. Again, holding down the Z key and clicking. And if I hold down my space bar right now, my mouse becomes a hand tool, and I can drag this towards the center of the screen so that we can see my selection. And you can see that my selection is not quite right. I mean, it's pretty close, but it's not quite right. So what I can do is I can click on it and I can adjust it around here until I get it in there, and that looks pretty good right there lined up. And so I'm happy with that. I can also move my selection tool around, or my selection around, with my arrow keys. You can see that if I move to the right, it moves it 1 pixel at a time and 1 pixel to the left until my marquee tool selection is right around the plate. So with that selected, I'm going to zoom back out, and a quick way of doing that is Command 0, 0 in the number pad, and that brings us to full frame. And you can see that it belongs up here on the B area. That's the next one that we're doing. I can come up here and go back to the Move tool, but that takes a little bit of time to go up there, and I have to change out my selection of tools. So here what I can do is I can hover over this plate, and I can hold down the Command key, and you see that it becomes a pair of scissors to cut. And now I can just click and drag, and it's as if I have the Move tool, and I can drag this on over to my spot here. Now again, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to let this, not again, but I'm going to let this go a little bit off to the side here, and show you that once it's situated there, once the whole selection is cut, I can also use my arrow keys to move the entire selection here and get it exactly where I want. Again, 1 pixel at a time, it's moving it. So as I click on my arrow keys, I can get this pretty much centered up into the location that I need. Now also using the arrow keys of my selection, I can hold down the shift and move it 10 pixels, I should say, left or right or up or down. So this is a good way to line it up. Let's say if it was off that far, I could come back and get it close and then use the single pixel to fine tune it in. So that's a simple way to move that. Once I have it in place, I can deselect it, and the hotkey for that is Command D, and once I press that, it deselects the plate and my selection is in place now. The next item we're going to select out is this coral right down here, and you see that this coral is on white, and we want to use our magic wand selection because that goes by color. And if we click on the white around it, it will select everything around this coral. Now there are a couple little things you should know about up here. We have what's called a tolerance, which is, we have it set to 32 for right now. That's what the book recommends. 32 means that it's going to pick 32 shades lighter and 32 shades darker, or darker tones of the color that you select. So like when I click on this white, it's going to go towards a little bit of a gray, and then it's going to go to an extreme white also. Now the other issue is that if I click in the white here, you see that when I click, it selects all over the place. I mean, and we don't want it to select all over the place. We want to confine it around the coral. So I'm going to deselect that by pressing Command D. And what I want to do is I'm going to go up here to my Marquee tool and select my rectangle marquee. And I'm going to draw a rectangle around this coral. And this tells Photoshop that whatever I'm doing next, I want you to keep it confined within this rectangle. So now I'm going to go to my magic wand tool, and I'm going to click on minus, and this is the minus selection. You see that when I bring my magic wand tool down here, it has a minus on it. And I'm going to click in the white here, telling Photoshop that I want you to minus out this white around this coral and select this coral. So when I click on it, you see that the coral is selected. And again, let me zoom in here so you can see that a little better. And our coral is selected pretty well around here. So I'm happy with that selection. So again, I'm going to zoom out by holding Command 0. And I want to drag that up into this spot where it says C here. So I will hover over the coral, press the Command key, it turns to a different cursor showing that I can cut this out and move it. And I'm going to drag it on up here. Now, when you have something in a location like that and you want to get it marked exact, it's kind of tough to see the edges because we have those marching ants around there. So you can go up to View, and you can go down to Show, and you can click on Selected Edges so that we can see the edges here. And let me just zoom in a little bit here so that you can see where we're at. And again, this is still selected. It doesn't show the selection, but it's still selected. So I can move it with my keys, which is what I'm doing right now, my up, down, right, and left arrow keys, and move it into perfect alignment with that shadow. So now I have a good alignment. I still want to go back up here to View and down to Show and Selected Edge because it is still selected. So I want to make sure that I deselect that before I move on. And I'm going to put Command D to deselect, and I'm going to put Command 0 to zoom out to full frame. And now we can move on to our next selection. So our next tool we're going to use is going to be the lasso tool. And we're going to do that with this muscle right here. And so first thing I'm going to do is zoom in on it. But we'll zoom in. move it up to the center here. Now, the lasso tool is in this group here, the lasso tool, and the polygonal lasso tool is also here. Now, the lasso tool works by pressing down on the mouse, the left mouse button, and just dragging it and following around with the pointer. Now, this is good for certain spots, but it also gets kind of tough to keep it nice and straight. So at any point while I'm holding down the mouse key, I can press the Alt key. Now when I press the Alt key, I let go of the mouse key and it becomes a polygonal lasso tool. And so now I can click and make points and work my way around it. So I'm working around the shell here. And if you keep your length short, if you make a long length, then obviously I can't bend that this way. But if I keep it short, I can create a curve on it without it looking like it's angled. And as you can see right there. Now at this point, I'm going to press down and I'm going to let go of the Alt key, and it becomes a lasso tool now. So I press down on the mouse key and let go of the Alt key, and it becomes the lasso tool. Now at this point, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and let go of my mouse and go back to a polygonal lasso tool, because now I can make some long straight lines on this and finish up a little quicker. Now again, like I said, this tool, you just make, I'm just clicking rather short distances here. I click here, click here. Every time I stop, I click, and you can follow this on around. And again, keep the line short and a number of clicks in between, and it will finish up for you. Now what I'm going to do is hold down my mouse key and my mouse and let go of the Alt key, and now I got just my regular lasso tool, and I let go and I make the completion here. So now I have my selection, and I'm going to zoom back up at Control and 0. And once I get my lasso tool above my selection here, hold down the Command key, and that gives me the scissors to cut it out. Bring it on up here to this point right here, and I'm going to let go. And now I need to rotate it. So to rotate it, I'm going to push Command T for transform and grab a corner here. And if I hold down the Shift, you'll see that it goes into 15-degree increments as I pull it. So this allows me to get it down to 90 degrees exactly. I can let go. I'm going to let go of my Shift, so now I can just move it without it clicking in place. And move it over the shadow. Now I'm going to put Enter or click on the check mark here to accept that transformation. And again, I can still hide my lines by Control H will hide my marching ants. This allows me to see the edge more effectively to make sure that's in the right location, which it looks like it is actually. And but whenever you hide the marching ants, it's still selected. So you want to make sure that after you're done hiding them, or after you're done for the reason of hiding them, whatever it is. In this case, it's for me to see how well it lines up, and I think I do need to move it over just a tiny bit on that shadow right there. Once I'm done with that, I want to put Command H again to show the highlights, and then Command D to deselect. I could have deselected while the highlights were hidden, but then if I forget about it and go try to move on, I'm still selecting that particular shell. So Command 0 to zoom out, and my next one is this nautilus right here. And we're going to do that one. I'm going to zoom in first. Z, I'm going to hold down Z and a couple clicks on the mouse, and then hold down the space bar and move the nautilus up to the center here. Now for this one, we're going to use the magnetic lasso tool here. And the magnetic lasso tool will try to stick to the edge. That's why it's called a magnetic lasso tool. So once I press the button down, I start dragging around here, it's automatically going to make selections. Now at any point, if I want, I could let go of the button and then just keep going. And you notice that when I let go of that button, that last one that connected here is off a little bit. So if I press the delete key, that gets rid of that. And now I'm just going to drag it around. So I'm not holding down any mouse button. I'm just dragging this around. You see that I went out there a little bit too far. So I'm going to back up my magnetic lasso tool, and I'm going to go ahead and press delete to get rid of that one. And I'm even going to go a little further back so that, again, see it popped up there. So I'm going to press delete and just drag it close to this edge right here. And again, I don't know, my mouse is just popping all over the place here. I'm not going very stable today. All right, there we go. I'll try dragging it around. Maybe if I stop talking and concentrate a little bit, that might help out. So you can see that it's doing a fairly good job of locating the edge. And again, all of those little squares that are put up by the magnetic lasso tool. Now I can actually place a square myself, or a point that locks down, and right here in this corner I'm going to click the mouse and I put that square there because I want to make sure that it does locate that corner and not move off it. So as I'm coming around here, just rotate it around and get up close to where we're done. And it's doing, again, I'm all over the place and it still does a very good job. You see that once I reach the starting point, it creates a 0 or a circle, which means that now when I click on it, it makes that selection and completes the selection itself. So I'm going to zoom out by Command 0. I'm going to go above it and hold down the Command key and cut it out and bring it right on up here. And again, I want to level it in there, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make sure that lines up well. I'm going to put Command H to hide it, and using my arrow keys, moving on up a little bit in the right position. And there you go. Command H again so that I can see the marching ants, and then Command D to deselect. Now the last thing that we're going to do is this little screw here, and I'm going to press my space bar to get the hand so I can move it on up so we can see that. And we're going to go back here to the elliptical marquee tool. Start from the center. If I hold down the Alt and pull out, it will actually create a circle from the center. And if I hold the Shift, it makes a perfect circle. And if I use my thumb now to press down on my space bar, I have ability to move that circle. So this is pretty good right there. Now I'm still holding down the Shift and Alt, and whenever you use a modifying key, you should hold it down until you're done with the mouse. So I'm going to lift my finger off the button on the mouse so that it selects, and then I'm going to remove my finger off the modifier buttons. So now I have this screw here that we're going to put on these 4 corners here, and I'm going to bring my cursor over it, press the Command key, and then click with my mouse and drag it on over here. Now, as you can see, it's kind of too big for that corner right there. So Command T, and just so you know, up here underneath Edit, you can go down to Free Transform right there, and that does the same thing as Command T. And I'm going to drag this on in. Now, the newer version of Adobe, depending on how you have it set up, or Adobe Photoshop, you don't have to hold down the Shift key to keep the aspect ratio. On some of them, you do. I know that when I teach at school, on those computers, I have to hold down the Shift key while I drag in a corner to keep the aspect ratio. But on mine at home, I do not. So while it's still in transform mode, I can actually move it right to here. And once I have it in a position to select, I'm going to check the OK here, the check mark here, to accept the transform. You can also press the Enter key. Now I want to see the top part of this, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit by holding down Command minus, and zoom out a little bit so I can see this top corner. And I want to duplicate this. I want to drag a duplicate up to here. So the way that I can do that is I want to go over here to the Move tool, click on that first, or press V, come down here, and then hold down the Alt. When I hold down the Alt, you see that I get this double arrow, this white and black arrow. That means when I press the mouse down and click and drag, I'm going to create a duplicate. Now, while I'm holding down the Alt key, if I press my Shift with my other finger, it actually keeps it in line with the other one. So once I get to the point that I like, I'm going to let go. And I don't know that if the book tells you this, that you can do this or not, but one of the things that you can do is rotate this around with the transform. So I'm going to rotate it because obviously these are not all going to be in the same direction. And then once I rotate it, I'm going to accept that transform, but it still has the selection around it. So, and it still looks like a transformer. Anytime you move it or enlarge it or reduce it, you do have to press enter to accept that transformation before you can move on to the next move, the next thing that you want to do. So again, I'm going to hold down my Alt key, and you see I got double arrow. I'm going to click with my mouse, then hold down my Shift key and drag this one right on over here. Now when I let go of the mouse and then my modifier keys, I can do the same thing I did before. I can go on the outside, rotate this around a little bit so that it's in a different position, select enter, and then now I can go ahead and hold down the Alt key again. I get my double arrows, click the mouse, hold down my Shift so it goes straight to the bottom one right there, let go, and then again I'm going to use my mouse on the outside and rotate it around a little bit so that it's just a slightly different than all the rest of them. And then once I'm done, I press enter to accept and Command D to deselect. Now if at any point you unselect this, then it won't move. The move tool doesn't work on the single element anymore because you're not telling Photoshop just to select that. So always make sure that you deselect something at the end. So with that done, we just have one small thing left to do, and that's going to be to crop. Okay, our final work here on this will be to crop it, and we use the crop tool here. And when you get to the crop tool, a couple things you got to worry about. These handles pop up all along the edge here, you see on the side, and when you roll your cursor over it, they become in and out arrows. And you want to be set up on ratio because that allows you to go any direction with these. Now if you have a number in it, let's say a 5x7, and then you click on ratio after the fact, you notice that 5x7 stays there. And so when I let me just zoom out a little bit more so you can see this. When I go ahead and pull this side out, you notice that the height changes too because it keeps that 5x7 ratio. So what you want to do is when you click on ratio here, you want to make sure that these numbers are cleared out, and you just press this clear button and clear those two numbers out. Now when you grab the corner and you move it, the corner moves by itself. So I'm going to bring this corner down to the corner of my frame right here, drag this corner out to the corner of my frame, and I'm just going to bring this side up level to my frame right here. And now once everything's level, you can click on the little check icon here, or you can press enter. Either one does that, and it reduces this down to this size all around this frame. So this completes this actual chapter. Now one thing you should be aware of is it says delete crop pixels here, which means that once you save this, these crop pixels that were out here, the rest of this picture is gone, which is what the book has you do. Most of the time you don't want to delete the crop pixels when you delete something because you do want to keep those pixels in reserve in case you need them for something. But if your composite or something else is getting rather large, then maybe you do want to get rid of those cropped pixels. Feel free to do so. So anyway, that wraps up chapter 3 in the Adobe Photoshop CC book, Classroom in a Book, and hopefully that helps you get through that chapter. Good luck. Talk to you soon.